Hi everyone, it's Emma here, and this week I'm talking through the question, could stress be triggering UTIs? So when we think about stress and how it could potentially relate to the different types of cystitis or UTIs, so when we've got traditional cystitis or a UTI that's bacterial, stress could potentially have a little bit of an indirect effect, which I'll go on to explain in a bit more detail why, although in this instance, some of the other more practical steps we can take to target that bad bacteria that's causing the infection could potentially overcome the stress. So it's maybe not quite such a direct effect, but when it can in many cases be a bit more direct is when it comes to cases of interstitial cystitis. So this is less likely to be caused by a bacterial infection, but stress is one of the key factors which could potentially have an effect. So again, I'm just going to go into this in a bit more detail to explain why. So I'm just going to now run through in more detail exactly how stress could potentially exacerbate symptoms of cystitis or UTIs. First of all, stress could indirectly have an effect on the likelihood of a UTI or cystitis by affecting your eating habits. So when we're more stressed, we can be more likely to make slightly different food choices, so perhaps slightly poorer choices in terms of more refined carbs and quicker sources of energy. And this is a kind of protective mechanism that your body assumes in a time of stress. It's a fight or flight situation. You need a quick source of energy. So that's where all your stimulants come in, such as your sugar, your caffeine, your alcohol. These all make sugar and glucose readily available in your bloodstream in order to help you fight or flight. So that's the mechanism behind that, and that's why physiologically it gives you a reason why during times of stress you might be reaching for more convenience foods or stimulants, for example. Practically, when you're stressed, you might be not quite as conscious of drinking enough water, and that habit might go out the window a little bit. So there are just some different reasons that potentially stress could alter your eating habits, and that in turn could potentially have an influence on the likelihood of the infection. Number 2, being stressed weakens your defences. So this is us talking about your immunity, your immune system. And unfortunately, in times of stress, your immune functions can suffer a little bit. And it goes back to this sympathetic nervous system being more dominant, that fight or flight response again. Unfortunately, during this time, your heart, your lungs, your muscles, all these systems are working quickly and efficiently in order to potentially save your life, whereas other functions such as your immune system, your digestion, your reproductive functions, for example, some of these other areas of the body can take a bit of a backseat, especially in instances of chronic stress. Sometimes short-term stress is quite productive and it's quite healthy, but it's when the stress becomes chronic that these key areas can suffer, so such as your immune system. And remember, we do rely on your immune system to fend off any infection, including your UTIs or cystitis. Number 3, stress fires up your sympathetic nervous system. So this is much of what I've talked about already. But we're also going to talk about quite a direct effect that it can have on your digestion and your urinary tract. So as I already mentioned, your digestive functions aren't going to be in tip-top condition or primary when you are in a state of stress. But what your body does do, and it's all about survival, because remember, traditionally stress was literally a fight or flight situation. You were being chased by a predator or something similar, whereas nowadays we know chronic stress is related to other things such as work or money, more modern stresses that can be more chronic, but your body still acts the same and still puts you into that fight or flight mode. So one of the effects of this on your digestion and your urinary tract is to clear you out. When you're nervous, you might find you're running to the loo more often, and clearing out your bladder and your digestion, and this is to lose some weight for when you're running away, or so that it's part of your digestion not working optimally as well. So this can all be part of it, and if this is a continual chronic response, this can initiate some irritation, especially if your bladder's already irritated, and this urgency to go is then even more dominant and even more present. So that can help explain that a little bit. We also have number 4, some of the chemical effects of stress. So we've talked about some of the physical effects of stress, but there is also a chemical influence underlying, lurking under the surface. And there's some research here to back this up, that in times of stress, certain hormones are released, including your corticotrophin releasing factor. And this is a hormone that's been linked in research to have a part to play, especially in cases of interstitial cystitis and having an overactive bladder. So this hormone can have quite a direct effect on the bladder, and it can be linked to stress. So just another potential mechanism there. And remember, any hormone or chemicals in the body that are out of balance, especially for a long period of time, many of these can be considered inflammatory and can cause issues when this state becomes chronic, and wouldn't traditionally be a chronic state. I've also got some research here, just interestingly, that stress can also modulate your perception of pain. So this is just a different take, that your sensitivity to pain could potentially be increased during times of stress, and also what we've mentioned about your stress making you go to the toilet more often, that can also have a part to play with nutrient deficiencies, as well as your body using up more resources when you're in that fight or flight and mode, and sympathetic nervous system is active. So nutrients like magnesium may also have a part to play in that modulation of pain perception if those levels become depleted. Now I'm just going to run through some tips in terms of managing your symptoms. So stress can be quite individual, of course, but just some tips there that if you do suspect stress is underlying and could very likely be contributing to your symptoms. So number 1, I have speaking up. Now this is very individual, and it depends again on the root cause of the stress, but sometimes speaking can help, especially if you're able to speak to the person or situation that's driving the stress, or just in general opening up and getting things off your mind can help. So just a little tip there to consider. We've got relaxation techniques. So this is more of a physiological mechanism in terms of trying to initiate your parasympathetic nervous system. We know this works better and helps to support your digestion, your urinary tract, and we want to initiate that rest and digest mode rather than the fight or flight mode. And this can be whatever works best for you. It can be quite individual, such as your stretching, your breathing, particularly exhaling techniques, or simply running a bath, listening to some calming music, reading a book, whatever works well for you, to try and just tip you over into more of that parasympathetic mode when you are in your waking hours. Next, I have getting some fresh air. So again, this is going to have quite a positive effect on your stress response, especially if we can combine this with breathing deeply, moving a little bit, doing a bit of gentle exercise. That these habits are all going to help to lessen the load of stress. Then we've mentioned stimulants, so aim to reduce your habitual use of stimulants, so your sugar, your caffeine, your alcohol. These very directly affect that stress response. They ignite your stress response. So any simple swap we can do, even just once daily, simple swaps can help. And I've got screens in there as well just anything overly stimulating, especially in the lead up to bedtime. If we can reduce that, we're going to be able to wind down before bed and have a better sleep. And sleep is also a time, crucially, that you're in that rest and digest parasympathetic mode. So sleep is just another factor in there. And then we have stress herbal remedies. So we have herbal remedies that could directly focus on the stress response, so such as our stress relief daytime drops, or we can target the cystitis symptoms head on, such as with our uva ursi and echinacea. So I always say to people to try and consider the root cause, which would be the stress, but of course if you've got symptoms of a UTI or cystitis, there and then you're going to want to treat it quickly there and then. So that would be something like your uva ursi and echinacea cystitis drops. That would be the remedy to help relieve the urinary symptoms relating to that cystitis, but of course it can be helpful to think about the underlying root causes with the stress as well. And then I just have a quick note there to think about your immune system as well. So we did touch on that stress could potentially impact your immune system, or there may be other factors there, but something like your echinacea alone, your echinophores, could potentially, that could be added in if you felt you needed some extra immune support. So I hope that helps, everyone. Thanks as always for listening. Please do leave any comments or questions below and I'll get back to you. I will tag any of the product mentions in the description. If you're watching on YouTube, please do subscribe to our Avogo YouTube channel and also hit the bell icon so you'll be notified of any future videos. Thanks, take care and speak soon.